Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. How do you fight back when someone files a lien on your house using paperwork that looks real? I'm not a lawyer, but I read property lines for a living, and something about their documents didn't add up. The HOA president told me I was in their jurisdiction. But one trip to the county records office changed everything. What did I find? I never thought I'd be writing one of those HOA horror stories you see on here, but here we are. 3 years ago, I bought what everyone called a fixer-upper on the edge of this really fancy gated community. As a freelance architectural drafter, I have a pretty good eye for property lines and legal documents, which is probably the only reason I'm not homeless right now. My house is old. Like, built in the 1940s old. It sits on what used to be farmland before some developer came in and built this whole subdivision around it. The original owner back in the day was apparently one stubborn old guy who refused to sell to the developers, so they just built around him. When the HOA was formed in 1998, his property was specifically excluded from the covenants because nobody wanted to deal with the legal mess of forcing him in. I knew all this when I bought the place. The realtor made sure to point it out because it meant I could do whatever I wanted with my property. No HOA dues, no architectural review committee, no rules about what color I could paint my front door. After years of renting apartments where landlords controlled everything, this felt like freedom. I painted my front door this beautiful soft teal color. I loved that door. Every time I came home from work or picking up my 8-year-old daughter from school, seeing that teal door made me smile. I also let the front yard go a bit natural. Instead of the perfect green grass lawns that surrounded me, I planted native wildflowers. It looked amazing in spring and summer, and the bees loved it. My neighbors weren't exactly thrilled about my choices. I could see them looking over from their perfectly manicured yards, but I figured live and let live. I kept to myself, worked from home most days, and made sure my daughter wasn't bothering anyone. We were quiet, respectful, and minded our own business. That all changed on a Tuesday morning in October when the mailman handed me a certified letter. The return address said it was from the neighborhood HOA. I figured maybe they were inviting me to some community event or something, so I opened it right there at the mailbox. Notice of Lien. Those words jumped off the page like they were on fire. $12,000 in unpaid dues, architectural violations for my unauthorized garden, and non-compliant exterior paint color. They were demanding immediate payment or they would begin foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. I stood there staring at this letter like it was written in a foreign language. $12,000. That was almost a quarter of what I'd paid for my entire house. For dues to an organization I'd never joined for a property that was never part of their jurisdiction. My daughter came running up from where she'd been collecting leaves in the wildflower patch. She took one look at my face and asked the question that still breaks my heart to think about. "Mommy, are we losing our house?" Kids are way too smart sometimes. I folded up the letter and told her everything was fine, just some paperwork confusion that Mommy would fix. But that night, after she went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table reading that letter over and over again, trying to figure out how this could be happening. The letter was signed by someone who called herself the HOA board president. Her actual name was on the letter, but I'll just call her Karen because that's honestly what she was. A middle-aged woman who had apparently decided that my existence was personally offensive to her. I spent the next few days doing research. I pulled out all my closing documents, the deed, the title insurance policy, everything. Sure enough, my property was explicitly listed as non-jurisdictional in the original HOA filing. I had copies of the plat maps showing that my lot predated the subdivision. I had documentation going back decades proving that my house was never part of any homeowner association. But here's the thing about dealing with people who think they have power over you. Sometimes facts don't matter to them. Sometimes they just double down and get meaner. 3 days after I got the first letter, I was coming home from the grocery store when I saw her. This woman in her 50s with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard was standing in my driveway taping something to my front door. She saw me pull up and gave me this look like I was something she'd found stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I got out of my car and walked over to see what she was doing. The paper she'd taped to my beautiful teal door was a notice of foreclosure, with big red letters across the top. She was still standing there when I read it, like she wanted to watch my reaction. "Are you the homeowner?" she asked, like she was doing me some kind of favor by talking to me. I told her I was, and asked who she was. She introduced herself as the HOA president, and told me that I had 15 days to bring my account current, or they would begin foreclosure proceedings. When I tried to explain that I wasn't part of the HOA, she actually laughed. Honey, that's what they all say. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Your house is in our jurisdiction whether you want to admit it or not. I asked her if she had any documentation showing that my property was part of the HOA. She just smiled this condescending smile and told me to come to the next board meeting if I wanted to discuss it. Then she got in her Mercedes SUV and drove away, leaving me standing there holding this foreclosure notice. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be resolved with a simple phone call and some paperwork. This woman had decided she was going to force me into her little kingdom whether I belonged there or not. I decided to attend their next board meeting. Not to beg or plead my case, but to observe. I wanted to see what kind of operation they were running and figure out my next move. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse on a Thursday evening. I dressed professionally but not fancy. I drove my old Honda Civic and parked between a couple of BMW SUVs. Walking into that clubhouse felt like entering enemy territory. About 15 people were sitting around folding tables, and they all turned to look at me when I came in. I could hear whispers and see people pointing. Karen was sitting at the front table with her clipboard and a stack of papers. She called the meeting to order and went through some routine business about pool maintenance and landscaping contracts. Then she got to what she called enforcement actions. That's when she mentioned my property. We have a resident who is refusing to comply with community standards and is claiming she's not subject to HOA authority. This is clearly a sovereign citizen tactic, and we cannot allow this kind of behavior to spread. A few people nodded and made disapproving noises. Karen continued talking about the importance of maintaining property values and community standards. She mentioned my wildflowers like they were some kind of environmental disaster, and called my teal door garish and inappropriate for our neighborhood aesthetic. When they opened the floor for questions, I stood up and politely introduced myself. I said I lived on the property they were discussing and wanted to clarify that I had never joined the HOA. I explained that my house predated the subdivision and was explicitly excluded from the original covenants. Karen looked at me like I was speaking nonsense. Sweetie, clearly you don't understand how these things work. Every property in this area is subject to our authority. You can't just opt out because you don't feel like paying dues. I asked if she could show me the signed agreement that made my property part of the HOA. That's when things got really ugly. Karen stood up and pointed her finger at me. Listen here, you can play these legal games all you want, but the bottom line is this. Pay up, or the sheriff puts your furniture on the curb next month. We've been through this with other people who thought they were special. One of the other board members chimed in, looking at my clothes and probably thinking about my old car outside. Maybe she just can't afford the dues. Some people move into neighborhoods they can't really afford to live in. That comment hit me wrong. I work hard for my money. I saved for years to buy my house. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor either, and I certainly don't need these people's charity or pity, but I kept my mouth shut and just listened. The meeting wrapped up with Karen announcing that they were moving forward with enforcement actions against non-compliant properties, and that anyone who thought they could avoid their responsibilities was going to learn otherwise very quickly. I drove home that night feeling angry but also strangely calm. These people had no idea what they were dealing with. As an architectural drafter, I spend my days reading legal documents, property surveys, and building codes. I know how to research, I know how to document. And I was starting to get the feeling that Karen and her little board were about to bite off way more than they could chew. 2 weeks later, I got another certified letter. This time it was from a law firm representing the HOA. The lawyer had the same last name as Karen, which was interesting. The letter was full of legal-sounding language demanding payment of the original $12,000 plus an additional $3,000 in legal fees and administrative costs. But the really insulting part was that they were now fining me $500 per day for my unauthorized garden. According to their calculation, my wildflowers were costing me $15,000 per month in violations. They were treating me like some kind of criminal for having native plants in my own yard. Instead of panicking or hiring an expensive lawyer right away, I decided to fight back using the system they were trying to use against me. I sent them a certified debt validation letter requiring them to provide proof that I owed them anything. I also sent a request for production of documents asking for the signed joinder agreement that supposedly made my property part of their HOA and copies of the original covenants, conditions, and restrictions that applied to my lot. The response came back 3 weeks later, and it was exactly what I was hoping for. They sent me a copy of what they claimed was my signed agreement to join the HOA. The document looked official enough with the right letterhead and formatting, but something about it didn't feel right. I spent a Saturday morning at the county recorder's office pulling every document related to my property going back to when it was first built. That's when I found it. The signature on the HOA agreement was supposedly from the previous owner of my house, the old farmer who had refused to sell to the developers. But according to the death certificate I found in the public records, he had died 2 years before the date on that agreement. Someone had forged his signature and backdated a document to make it look like he had voluntarily joined the HOA before he died. It was such an obvious fraud that I actually laughed out loud sitting there in the records office. But then I realized how serious this was. They hadn't just made a mistake or bent the rules, they had committed actual crimes. Here's where I made what was probably either the smartest or dumbest decision of my life. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to let them keep digging their hole deeper. If they wanted to file a fraudulent lien against my property, I was going to let them do it. Because once they filed that lien with the county using forged documents, they would be guilty of slander of title and securities fraud. Real crimes with real consequences. I spent the next month documenting everything. I got certified copies of the death certificate, the original plat maps, the property deeds, and every piece of correspondence they had sent me. I organized it all in a folder and waited. Sure enough, they filed the lien. I got the notice from the county recorder's office on a Friday afternoon. $12,000 in alleged HOA dues now officially recorded against my property title. It would show up on any credit check or title search, making it impossible for me to refinance or sell my house. But they had just handed me everything I needed to destroy them. I called Karen's office on Monday morning and told her I wanted to schedule a settlement meeting to resolve this dispute. I suggested we meet at a local coffee shop where we could talk privately. She sounded surprised but agreed, probably thinking I was finally ready to surrender and pay up. The meeting was set for the following Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. I told her she could bring whoever she wanted from the board, and I would come alone to discuss resolution. What I didn't tell her was that I had already contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes, and we had spent 2 hours the previous day preparing for what was about to happen. Wednesday arrived gray and rainy, which somehow felt perfect for what I was about to do. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early and picked a table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. I had a simple manila folder with me, nothing fancy or intimidating, just the facts. Karen showed up right on time with 2 other board members. She was all smiles and confidence, probably expecting me to hand her a check and apologize for causing so much trouble. They ordered their drinks and sat down across from me, and Karen started talking before I could say anything. "I'm so glad you finally came to your senses about this. We really don't want to see you lose your home, but rules are rules. I've brought the payoff letter with the current balance, and we can get this whole mess cleared up today." She slid a piece of paper across the table showing a balance of just over $18,000. Apparently my daily fines had been adding up while we scheduled this meeting. I looked at the paper for a moment, then slid it back to her. "Actually, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to pay you anything. I'm here to offer you a way out of the legal trouble you've gotten yourselves into." The confident smile disappeared from Karen's face. One of the other board members asked what I was talking about. I opened my manila folder and laid out 3 documents on the table between us. The first was the death certificate of the previous owner, clearly showing he had died in March 2019. The second was their forged HOA agreement dated May 2021. The third was a copy of the fraudulent lien they had filed with the county using that forged document. What you've done here is commit securities fraud and slander of title. Those are felonies. You've also filed false documents with a government agency, which is another crime. The good news is, I'm willing to let this go if you meet my conditions. Karen picked up the death certificate and stared at it for a long moment. I could see the color draining from her face as she realized what this meant. One of the other board members was looking back and forth between the documents like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "These conditions are simple. Remove the lien by 5 o'clock this afternoon. Pay me $5,000 for the stress and lost time dealing with your harassment. Karen resigns from the board immediately and has no further contact with me or my property. If you agree to these terms, I file nothing with the police and we all move on with our lives." That's when Karen found her voice again, and it was not pretty. She started yelling about how I was trying to blackmail them and how I couldn't prove they had done anything wrong. She called me a liar and a troublemaker and said there was no way they were giving me a penny. "You're bluffing! You can't prove anything, and even if you could, no one would care. We run this neighborhood, not you." I didn't argue with her. I just quietly put my documents back in the folder, stood up, and walked toward the door. As I was leaving, I heard her shouting behind me that I had until the end of the week to pay my balance, or they were calling the sheriff. I went straight from the coffee shop to my attorney's office. We spent an hour going over everything one more time, and then he made some phone calls. By 5:30 that afternoon, we had filed complaints with the police department, the county recorder's office, and the state attorney general's office. We also sent a formal demand letter to the HOA's insurance company informing them that their client had committed intentional fraud. The next morning, I was drinking coffee on my front porch when 2 police cars pulled up to Karen's house. I watched through my wildflowers as they knocked on her door and had a long conversation with her on her front step. She kept pointing in the direction of my house and gesturing wildly, but the officers just nodded and took notes. About an hour later, my attorney called to tell me that the HOA's insurance company had just contacted him. Apparently, they were declining to provide coverage for the lawsuit because it involved intentional criminal acts by a board member. That meant Karen and the other board members would be personally liable for any damages. The lawsuit we filed was seeking $40,000 in actual damages, plus attorney fees and punitive damages for the intentional nature of their fraud. My attorney explained that in cases like this, courts tend to take a very dim view of people who abuse positions of authority to harass homeowners. Within a week, I started getting calls from neighbors I had never talked to before. Apparently, word was getting around the subdivision about what had happened, and people were not happy. It turned out that Karen had been pretty unpopular even before this mess, and several people had stories about her inappropriate behavior and power trips, but the real drama started when the HOA had to send out a special assessment notice to all the homeowners in the subdivision. Since their insurance wasn't covering the lawsuit, they needed to raise emergency funds to pay for their legal defense and the potential settlement. Every house in the HOA was being hit with a special assessment of nearly $2,000 to cover Karen's mistakes. That's when my neighbors really turned on her. I heard from several people that she was getting angry phone calls and heated confrontations at the grocery store. People were demanding that she pay the legal costs herself instead of forcing the entire neighborhood to cover for her fraud. The case moved through the court system faster than I expected. Karen's brother-in-law lawyer apparently realized pretty quickly that they had no defense for the forged documents and the fraudulent lien. 6 months after I filed the lawsuit, we reached a settlement agreement. The HOA agreed to pay me $45,000 and remove the lien from my property. Karen was required to resign from the board and was permanently banned from any position of authority in the neighborhood association. The settlement also included a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from taking any enforcement action against my property in the future. But the best part of the settlement was something my attorney suggested that I hadn't even thought of. As part of the agreement, I was granted an easement that allowed me to build a privacy fence along the entire border between my property and the subdivision. The fence could be up to 8 feet tall, which just happened to be exactly high enough to block Karen's view of the sunset from her back deck. I used part of the settlement money to hire a fence company to build the most beautiful cedar privacy fence you've ever seen. 8 feet tall, solid boards, professional installation. It runs along the entire back edge of my property line, which is exactly where Karen's backyard borders mine. The fence went up on a Saturday morning while Karen was apparently out running errands. When she came home, she called the police, claiming that I was illegally blocking her view and that there must be some ordinance against building fences that high. The officer who responded was very polite but explained that the fence was entirely on my property and that I had every legal right to build it. Karen demanded to speak to his supervisor. She called the county zoning office. She even called the mayor's office to complain. But the answer was the same everywhere. The fence was legal, properly permitted, and entirely within my rights as a property owner. That evening, I was sitting on my front porch with my daughter eating ice cream and watching the sunset. My wildflowers were blooming beautifully, my teal door was gleaming in the late afternoon light, and my beautiful fence was casting a long shadow across Karen's backyard. My daughter looked up at me with chocolate ice cream on her chin and asked if we were still losing our house. I told her, no, honey, we were never losing our house. This was our home, and nobody could take it away from us. As we sat there watching the last light fade from the sky, I realized something that made me smile. Karen was probably sitting in her backyard right now, looking at 8 feet of cedar boards instead of the sunset she used to enjoy from her deck. Every evening for the rest of the time she lived in that house, she would be reminded that sometimes the quiet single mom with the old car and the wildflower garden knows exactly what she's doing. The lawsuit officially closed 3 months later when the final settlement check cleared my bank account. I used some of the money to make improvements to my house that had been on hold since I bought it. New windows, a updated kitchen, and professional landscaping for my wildflower garden that made it look even more beautiful than before. I also set up a college fund for my daughter with a significant portion of the settlement money. Karen's harassment and fraud had inadvertently provided my daughter with a much more secure future than we'd had before this whole mess started. The HOA eventually elected a new board of directors who were much more reasonable and professional than Karen's crew had been. They sent me a formal letter of apology for what had happened and assured me that there would be no further issues with my property or my landscaping choices. But I kept my attorney's contact information handy, just in case. About a year after the settlement, I heard through casual conversation with neighbors that Karen and her husband had put their house on the market. I don't know if the legal bills and neighborhood drama finally got to be too much, or if they just got tired of looking at my fence every day. Either way, I didn't really care. I was just glad they were someone else's problem now. The new owners who bought Karen's house turned out to be a young couple with a baby. They introduced themselves when they moved in and complimented my wildflower garden. The woman mentioned that she was thinking about planting something similar in her front yard because she loved how natural and beautiful it looked. I offered to help her choose native plants that would work well in our climate, and we ended up becoming friends. It's funny how much more pleasant life can be when you're dealing with reasonable people instead of power-hungry bullies. These days, my neighborhood is pretty quiet. The new HOA board focuses on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. They don't send threatening letters or file fraudulent liens or tape foreclosure notices to people's front doors. My daughter is now 11 and still loves our wildflower garden. She's learned to identify all the different types of native plants and can tell you which ones attract butterflies and which ones the bees prefer. Sometimes her friends come over after school and they all play in the backyard while I work at my drafting table by the window. And every time I come home and see that teal front door, I still smile. Because it's not just a door anymore. It's a symbol of everything I fought for. My right to make my own choices about my own property. My right to live peacefully without harassment from people who think they have power over me. My right to raise my daughter in a home where we belong and where nobody can threaten to take that away from us. The fence has weathered beautifully over the past couple of years. It's turned this lovely silver gray color that looks perfect with my wildflowers. I've planted climbing roses along parts of it, and they're starting to fill in nicely. By next summer, it's going to be absolutely gorgeous. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just paid that first $12,000 demand instead of fighting back. Would Karen have left me alone, or would she have found new ways to harass me? Would she have tried the same thing with other neighbors who didn't know their rights or couldn't afford to fight back? I'm glad I'll never have to find out the answers to those questions. Sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to hit back twice as hard as they hit you. And sometimes the best revenge is just living well while they deal with the consequences of their own bad choices. My story spread around social media for a while after the settlement became public record. I got messages from people all over the country who had dealt with similar HOA harassment, and a lot of them asked for advice on how to fight back. I always told them the same thing. Document everything. Know your rights. Don't let anyone intimidate you into giving up something that belongs to you. But mostly, I just encourage people to get good legal advice from someone who specializes in these kinds of disputes. I was lucky that I had the knowledge and resources to fight back effectively, but not everyone does. There are attorneys who understand HOA law and can help people navigate these situations without having to become legal experts themselves. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself when people try to use fake authority to push you around. Sometimes you have to be willing to go to war to protect your peace. Sometimes you have to be ready to lose everything to keep what's rightfully yours. But in the end, justice has a way of working itself out. Bullies eventually meet their match. People who abuse their power eventually face consequences. And sometimes, the quiet single mom with the wildflower garden and the teal door ends up being exactly the wrong person to mess with. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened over 5 years ago, and it still ticks me off whenever I think about it. Also, sorry about how long this is, LOL. I was 17 working at a big theme park and had been working there for the better part of the year. I had quickly picked things up and was usually regarded as the responsible one on the team when it was just a bunch of us teens working a ride. We had a college student intern lead who was not good at leading or training new hires. We'll call him M. At my main ride, it required 3 people minimum to operate. 1 person in the control booth, 1 at the entrance gate, and 1 at the exit. However, we could have 4 or 5 if we were incredibly busy to help deal with the line. The people in the booth and at the entrance could not see the person at the exit directly, so we used radios. The control booth also had a camera on the exit gate. From day 1 on the job, we were taught hand signals in case the radio dies or for quick communication. These signals were universal across the entire park. That summer, 3 freshly certified kids, we had to take tests to prove we paid attention to training, started the ride with someone locked inside the fence, also known as not in a seat. Twice it was another employee, once it was a guest, which was a huge deal. The thing with those incidents was that those in the control booth didn't notice their mistake until the others screamed at them to hit the E-stop. Those new hires were either retrained or moved to a simpler ride. Well, one incredibly busy day, there were 5 of us running things, me, M, and 3 others. M had been called over to another ride, which normally wasn't an issue. About an hour later, someone was scheduled to go home and M hadn't come back yet. I called the other ride and asked them to send him back. We could have run things with 3 of us, but it was super busy and we really needed a 4th. A few minutes later, someone, not our lead, was sent over to take over. Weird, but no big deal. Another hour or so went by, someone else needed to go home. I called again asking for M. Also, all the radio's batteries were dead/dying. Things had slowed down, so I, being the spare 4th person, took the radios to the office to get fresh batteries. This took less than 10 minutes, and in that time, the guys had switched to hand signals as we were trained. When I came back, our lead had once again sent over someone else to take his spot. At this point, I realized that M was probably just shooting the crap in the nice air-conditioned booth at the other ride. Now, the guy that got sent over to us was normally at a roller coaster and hadn't been at this ride in over a month, so I gave him a quick review and he took controls. I turned around for maybe 30 seconds when I hear yelling. I turn around and the ride was stopped maybe 3 feet off the ground with our entrance guy locked in the fence. The guy at controls saw what he did and hit the E-stop, something that the other screw-ups that summer did not think to do. We had to call upper management, and wouldn't you know, M came running over. This time the highest of the higher-ups came over as well. They pulled each of us aside and interrogated us, which was odd, then walked away and talked for like half an hour. They then fired the guy at controls on the spot and came up with BS reasons to get the rest of us removed from running rides. They absolutely were only doing that to make an example of us. I tried to rip into M for shirking his duties, but as an anxiety-ridden kid, it didn't hit very hard. I was mainly pissed off that they fired the poor guy who never should have been there in the first place. Remember I took the already dead radios earlier? They tried to say I had removed communication devices from the ride area, which prevented them from letting controls know they were outside the gate. They were basically trying to pin the whole thing on me. Total bull, because this happened after I brought them back. I assume M threw me under the bus for being in charge while he wasn't there. Also, we had hand signals. I tried explaining that to them, but they didn't give a crap. I refused to sign the paperwork, which would be admitting fault, so this fight was stretched over multiple days. Plus, I was leaving for college in like 2 weeks, and didn't want to spend my last days of summer cleaning bathrooms. They gave us a new rule. If a single radio was dying, we had to call a manager to fetch us a new battery, even if we had people to spare to go grab one instead. If a radio died, we had to close the ride. Managers roamed around the whole area and were responsible for so much, so if you called them and it wasn't urgent, it could take a long time for them to show up. The next day, my radio was dying. I called the manager. Half hour goes by, I call again. My radio died. I shut down the ride. The people in the over an hour line got pissed. I explained to people that we had to close because of the radios. Naturally, they got even more pissed because of how stupid that was. Manager shows up minutes later. I took the battery from him with a smile on my face and he left without saying a word. After many complaints, management was magically fine with us using hand signals again. I never signed that paperwork. I left for college, and funny enough, M also went to the same college. I ran into him once, he just kinda nodded at me, I gave him a dirty look, and I never saw him again. The next summer, I was rehired by the park as a lead and actually did my damn job. The next one is an entitled people story. So, I have a distant friend. She's a friend of a friend of a friend type deal. She has 3 kids, I have 3 cats. Her kids are enrolled in a camp very close to my house. Pickup for the camp is at 4 p.m. The line for pickup for the kids is 3 p.m. Yeah, it can take a really long time to pick up kids at that camp. A big old line of cars form up every day to get the kiddies. It's a bit chaotic. Now, here's the story. This friend of a friend has been using her lunch breaks to fetch the kiddies from camp. Sometimes the traffic is so bad she's late getting back to work. I'm not sure if she takes the kids with her to work or drops them off someplace, but the situation at work is getting dicey. Her boss is sick of her coming back late. Now, I live very close to this camp. My house is on the pick up your kid parade route these parents are on. Oh, there are some angry humans waiting to get into that school for those kids. Mark my words. A friend of a friend has come up with a brilliant idea, in her eyes anyway. She's asked me to go get the kids for her, all 3 of them. She would like me to take them back to my house, give them a snack or something, and wait for her to pick them up. She thinks it will be much easier to fetch them from my house than the camp, since she has to drive into the camp and I can merely walk. I said, no, I'm not a babysitter, I'm not a nanny. I'm an artist. I have a job. I work from home, but I have a job. I'm not watching 3 kids under the age of 10 for unknown hours and have to provide snacks for them as well. She said that she would pay me $20 to fetch the kids. I said, no, I already have $20, so I'm good. She doesn't find this funny, but I sure did. She tells me she's a single mom trying to do her best. It takes a village. I'm so close to the camp, why can't I just do this favor for her? I say, because it's not a favor, it's a job. I already have a job, I work from home, I'm an artist. Also, I don't know your kids. I barely know you. I'm not watching 3 stranger kids for anyone. That's just how the cookie crumbles. Well, she is unhappy. Very, very unhappy. Her next plan is set into motion. Send in the mommy group. She gets my friend and few other friends to email and call me. Nothing like a good mommy wagon train to circle around with. Except that doesn't work either. You see, I'm not in high school, so the whole peer pressure thing no longer applies to my life. I don't care if they like me or not. Also, I'm not a human mommy, I'm a fur baby mommy. Other fur baby mommies don't care about such things. We are a super laid-back group in general. We have a pick up your kid's poop and I'll pick up my kid's poop policy. Mommy group made some big points with me. 1, how easy it would be for me to get the kids from the camp. 2, I could do arts and crafts with the kids until mom came and got them. 3, I would not be lonely during the day because I would have kids to play with. 4, it would be a nice thing to do for a single mom who's struggling with a situation right now. All really interesting points that have absolutely no impact on me. Arts and crafts with the kiddies? Are you for real? I don't do arts and crafts, I sell art for a living. I'm not a freaking Michaels. The kids can't help, I don't want them to, and my studio some days is a full-on wreck. I don't even let the cats in there on those days. Plus, single mommy with 3 kids is driving a new BMW. Perhaps she should have gotten a more economic car and a professional nanny. I reminded them all that if it was so easy to do this one thing, then they too can get the kids from the camp. Hell, park in my dang driveway if you need be, ladies. Then they can walk in and grab the kids, take them home, and do arts and crafts. Plus, friend of a friend will pay them $20 for their trouble. Not sure if that's for the week or per day, but who cares? It's like printing money at that point. All they have to do is provide the snacks and wait for her to claim the kids. Also, truly funny reply, but still not getting a laugh from the mommy group. In fact, I only got stunned silence and I think cricket sounds. I'm just not hitting my target audience with this humor. Well, it took a while for friend of a friend to see that I'm not willing to provide childcare for free for the $20 or for the sake of the village. I also pointed out that my idea of juice boxes is a franja refreshing white carton, and my idea of a snack is waiting until dinner. All points she finds to be unhelpful and not practical. Sadly, friend of a friend Mommy is still racing to get her kids from the camp. Turns out the Mommy group folks are just too busy to fetch the kids for her, too. Bummer, I know. I thought it would be so easy for them, since they had made such good points about picking them up. Life moves on, camp is still swinging, the parade of cars grows longer and slower every day. Then today, this happened. I'm inside my house, sitting on my couch, binging the good, the bad, and the ugly of street food vendors on YouTube. I hurt my back, so I'm leaning on a heating pad. You can see me from my living room window if you're on the parade of cars picking up their kids from the camp. My feet are up on the coffee table, my cats are on the porch, my juice box, Franja, is to the right of me. Just then, I get an angry text on my phone. I thought you said you're working? Too busy to get the kids? Looks like you're just sitting there doing nothing but watching TV. What the hell is the matter with you? Why can't you be a better friend? Oh my god, it's friend of a friend. Neato. To which I answer, I'm working. I'm on my iPad drawing. I'm an artist. I can do that. Gee, ain't my work grand? I am too busy to get your kids. It looks like I'm watching TV because I am watching TV. YouTube. Dancing Bacons. Street fair in Malaysia. Cool. I highly recommend if you ever get a second to yourself. I hurt my back, so that's what the hell is wrong with me. Thanks for asking. And I can't be a better friend because I don't want to pick up your kids. I feel like if we got closer and communicated more, I would be obligated to fetch your babies. You do see how my way is more convenient. For me. Her. Those blasted dancing ... things on the text chat. Me. Are you sitting in the car outside my house right now? Her. Slight pause. Yes. Me. Turns around slowly, big old wine glass in my hand. I smile, I wink. I lift the glass. I text, cheers! God, if only I had some pot to light up. Now that would have been perfect. She was not amused. Still, no laughs. I think I'm losing my touch? The next story is titled, The Karen Next Door. Overcoming bigotry, finding justice, and forgiveness. I've lived in this neighborhood for a few years now, and it's been an amazing experience. However, there was one neighbor who made my life a living hell. Her name was Karen, and she was the epitome of entitlement, even before she joined the HOA board. She constantly made racist remarks about my Indian heritage and my choice to wear a sari, a traditional dress. Despite her negative attitude, I refused to let her get to me. I continued to dress in my cultural attire with pride, even when I knew I would run into her. One day, I was heading to the store when Karen blocked my way and started screaming about my clothing. According to her, my outfit was offensive and made her feel threatened. She even called the police on me, claiming I was a terrorist. I was shocked and frustrated, but I kept my cool and waited for the police to arrive. Karen put on a show for the police, but they quickly saw through her lies. They explained that they couldn't arrest me for violating the HOA dress code, and they were about to leave when I remembered something. I told them about the strange smells and fumes coming from Karen's basement and expressed my concerns that they might be toxic. The police took my concern seriously and decided to investigate. It turned out that Karen and her husband were using their basement as a meth lab. They were arrested on the spot, and the entire neighborhood was in shock. Karen was removed from the HOA board, and her toxic presence was finally eradicated from our community. In the aftermath, my other neighbors reached out to me, ashamed of how Karen had treated me. They were curious about my culture and eager to learn more. I welcomed them into my home, and we had a wonderful time sharing stories and learning from each other. It was a great reminder that education and understanding are the keys to building a strong and inclusive community. The news of Karen's arrest made headlines, and the story went viral. People from all over the country were horrified by her behavior, and the fact that she had been running a meth lab. The story even caught the attention of a famous civil rights attorney who offered to represent me and sue Karen for her discriminatory behavior. Together, we filed a lawsuit against Karen, and the trial was a media sensation. Karen tried to defend herself by claiming that she was just enforcing the HOA dress code, but her lies were exposed in court. She was found guilty of discrimination and ordered to pay me a hefty sum in damages. The entire community celebrated the verdict, and Karen was shunned by everyone. As for me, I continued to wear my sari with pride and became an advocate for cultural diversity and inclusion. I was invited to speak at events all over the country, and my story inspired others to stand up to bigotry and discrimination. In the end, Karen got what she deserved, and justice was served. Her downfall was a reminder that hatred and intolerance have no place in our society, and that we must always fight against those who seek to divide us. Months after Karen was found guilty of discrimination and ordered to pay me a hefty sum in damages, the neighborhood slowly began to heal from her toxic presence. However, there was still one more shock in store. One day, I received a call from the civil rights attorney who had represented me during the trial. He told me that Karen had requested a meeting with him and wanted to make amends. I was skeptical at first, but the attorney assured me that Karen was sincere and genuinely wanted to apologize for her behavior. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet with Karen and the attorney. When I arrived at the attorney's office, Karen was there, looking nervous and contrite. She apologized profusely for her past behavior and for the harm she had caused me and the entire community. At first, I was hesitant to believe her, but as she spoke, I could tell that she was truly remorseful. She told me that the trial had been a wake-up call for her and that she had realized how wrong she had been. She had started therapy and had been working on herself ever since. After our meeting, I spoke with some of my other neighbors, and they confirmed that Karen had indeed changed. She had been volunteering at local community centers and had even attended cultural sensitivity training. I was amazed and heartened to hear this. In the end, I decided to forgive Karen, and we began to slowly rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were times when old wounds were reopened, but Karen was committed to making things right. We started meeting regularly, and she even joined me in some cultural events, which I found touching. The story of Karen's transformation eventually made its way back to the media, and people were amazed by her transformation. Karen became somewhat of a poster child for redemption and forgiveness. She was even invited to speak at a few events where she shared her story and urged others to take responsibility for their actions. Looking back on everything that happened, I couldn't believe how far we had come. What had started as a story of bigotry and intolerance had turned into a story of redemption and forgiveness. It was a powerful reminder that people can change, and that even the most hardened hearts can be softened with time and effort. The next story is titled, Invalidating Personal Choices: Why Being a Babysitter Doesn't Mean You Can't Drink. I think every female family member who is the youngest of the adult generation, or at least a teen, can relate to this. Yesterday, we had a kind of big family function for the 80th birthday of my gran. My mother's younger sister was there with her kids, preschool/elementary school age. And like every single time, I, 20F, was expected to watch the little demons while her mother can have some adult time. Don't get me wrong, I like them, but in small doses. And I can't understand why me, since her ducking husband was there. Since the weather was nice, it was a barbecue in my gran's garden, or a backyard like Americans would say. It was good. I saw some cousins of my generation. Some of them I haven't seen in years, so since I had Saturday off, I work in healthcare, I shared a beer with my cousins and catched up. Well then, my aunt came in and asked why I dared to drink since I had to watch over her kids today since she needed some adult time. I just asked her what about her husband, and she gave me the whole sob story of he worked all week. Lol, I did that too? Even made overtime in the nursing home I'm working in. And that it's his day off. Again, mine too. And that he's on the grill. He's literally standing next to my uncle who's actually grilling and sipping beer. So I looked her dead in the eye and chugged the entire beer that I just opened, 0.5 liter bottle, looked her dead in the eye while my brother, the saint he is, took the empty bottle out of my hand and gave me a new one. I told her sorry, but I already drank. She left in a huff, and of course she told my mother and my gran, and of course my mom was upset with me because she's my aunt and yada yada. The only ones on my side were my brother and my stepdad, who nearly pissed himself laughing when he heard what I did. The last story is titled, Rejecting Xenophobia. Meet my French husband and lose your time if you refuse to sell to an American. So, I'm, 38F, vacationing with my mother, 71F, in Europe right now, and she just told me this epic story that I must now pass down to all of you. Some background, my mother is a very nice person to strangers, especially salespeople. Aggressive salespeople will back her into a corner for an hour until I come rescue her because she doesn't want to be rude. My father passed a few years ago at age 81, and he was born in Egypt and was schooled in both French and Arabic, and considered both to be his native languages, and then learned English as an adult when he moved to the US. A few years after they got married in 1976, but before they had kids, they took a vacation to Paris. My mother collects stamps, and she wanted some French plate blocks to add to her collection. She left my father napping in the hotel room and went to the post office a block away, planning on spending $300 to $400 on stamps. She got to the post office and waited in a very long line. When she finally got to the front, the woman behind the counter told her in perfect English that she didn't speak English, so my mom waited for another post employee to become free. The second employee finally became available, but was very rude to my mother, telling her that she couldn't help her, couldn't sell her this, out of stock of that, etc., while rolling her eyes and being otherwise nasty and rude, nearly bringing my mother to tears. My mother was so upset that she decided to get some revenge. She went back to the hotel room and woke up my father and brought him to the post office. My mother waited until the rude woman was available and had my dad translate in perfect French, telling the woman that my mom wanted the plate block of every set of stamps she had, watching her remove the plate block from each sheet. For those of you that don't know, when you remove the plate block from a sheet of stamps, the remaining stamps must be counted by hand. After the nasty woman had a nice stack of plate blocks for my mother, one of every stamp design they had, my mother turned to my father and said, "Tell her I've changed my mind." Not only did that woman miss out on a huge sale for being mean and nasty, but she also had to spend a good 30 to 60 minutes after closing to hand count each individual stamp after they closed for the day. I am just so proud of my very polite mother right now. The next one is an entitled people story. I am a mariner. My position on this ship is mate. Below me are my deckhands who are responsible for the labor work like painting, grinding, maintenance, line handling, cargo ops, etc. Above me is the chief mate, second in command, and the captain, in charge of everyone and the responsible individual for the entire ship. We are officers, and we do the planning for navigation, ship handling, training, payroll, etc. I work for a private company that pays me by a day rate, which is a 12-hour workday. I work 1 month on and 1 month off. Like most industries, we are undermanned, can't hire enough to fill all positions. Now, this ship I work is even harder to crew up, mainly because of the captain. He's got a notorious reputation for being a jerk, so people find all sorts of ways not to come to this boat. And if they do, they only work one tour and never come back. I joined this ship back in May, and for the last 7 months, it's been kinda hell working for this captain. He's a narcissist, condescends everyone, insults everyone, works us like slaves, never thanks us, just an all-around class act. You know these type of bosses. They never let up. They push you to the limit and just make you hate work and life. With that said, I've been working 15, sometimes 18 hours a day because we're short-handed. I'm doing all sorts of work that's not in my job description. I had to do cargo ops, handle mooring lines, maintenance, all in addition to my mate duties. I'm a very hard worker, a team player, and never say no to work. The thing is, we don't get paid for any more than 12 hours of work a day. So all those extra hours I worked are unpaid. It burns me and I freaking hate it, but like I said, I'm a team player. I want to make sure it's safe for my guys, the operations get completed, and clients stay happy. So I do what's asked of me. I'm also the cook. We don't have an official cook on board because this is considered a small crew and small ship. I was cooking lunch every day for my crew and many dinners too. Generally, you're on your own for breakfast and dinner. I was so good at my job that he and the chief mate passed their duties on to me so they can just sit back and relax. Chief mates and captains have a lot of paperwork to do, but I was handling that for them too, until up to this point. Well, one day, I'm just completely burnt out with these 15 to 18 hour days. I get into a discussion about how the captain and company is stealing my wages because I'm working more than 12 hours a day. I asked him if I could show up to watch an hour later than my scheduled duty. The engine department does this when they require their folks to work overtime the day before. I work a swing shift which overlaps both the captain and chief mate, so it's not unheard of or uncommon to let guys show up late, especially if they worked more than 12 hours the previous day. Well, once I asked to sleep in an extra hour, all hell broke loose with him insulting me, calling me names, being racist, nobody wants to work anymore, blah blah blah. Just nasty, inappropriate behavior that shouldn't happen but happens all the time in this industry. He then finishes the verbal beatdown with a cocky-eating grin. You know, mate, you never had to work overtime. You could have just said no. I was steaming at that point, but I just replied with, okay, roger that. I called it a day and went to bed. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, I'm already on watch, and he comes on to work and asks me what's for lunch. Nothing. I'm not cooking today. Did you pull out anything from the freezer at least? Nope. So nobody had any real food for lunch. They all made sandwiches and ate chips instead. Later that day, hey, I need you to go finish painting the rescue boat. The guys are busy with other projects, and I want this done today. Well, Captain, since it's not in my job description, I respectfully decline. We get into a little arguing, but he concedes. The very next day, he pulls the same thing. What's for lunch? Nothing. What do we have that we can cook real fast? I don't know, Captain. I didn't check. Cooking isn't my job, remember? So I don't plan on doing it. He rushes to cook some whole chickens in an hour, and they came out raw and really ticked off the crew. Nobody touched his food. This routine lasted a whole week until it was the end of my tour and I got to go home. I returned to duty a month later, and he thought I would forget or let it slide. I indeed did not forget or let it slide. For the next entire month-long tour, the captain had to do the cooking because the chief mate and I refused to do it, and he complained because he had to wake up early and prep food. I was already doing all that when I was cooking. I just didn't complain. I enjoy cooking, but I was willing to die on this hill. I wasn't letting it go. I refused to let him win this battle. I did not cook one meal. To be petty, I made myself delicious food, did not share it, I refused any work that wasn't in my job description. What's he gonna do? Write me up on disciplinary for not doing someone else's job that isn't mine or for not working past 12 hours? Not happening. Understand, at this point I was physically tired, burnt out, and mentally drained from doing everyone's job and taking crap from him. I asked for a transfer to another ship, but got denied, so I'm still stuck on this ship with this captain, but now he knows where I stand. And I haven't cooked or did extra duties since. And that's what you get for taking advantage of a good worker and always insulting me. The next story is titled, Neighbor Likes to Park in Front of My House? Okay then. This happened a few years ago. My neighbor started parking on the street behind my car, like literally inches, for no apparent reason. My neighbor has a driveway, empty, and also lived 2 houses down the street. I don't have a driveway, so on-street parking is a must for me. So after a few weeks, I asked if it was necessary to park so close when there was literally a shit-eating grin on his face. A few weeks pass by, and my car gets hit because someone thought there was enough room to clear as his truck blocked the view of my car entirely. I see this happen, but unfortunately can't get a model or license plate number. I find my neighbor's email address, because I really didn't feel like talking to him, and asked him again if he could just park further down the road closer to his house. He replied, "Nope, suck on it." Okay, I had lived here for quite a long time and never had any issues with him or any other neighbors. I keep to myself, never make noise, don't have any noisy pets or parties, etc. His truck has his business name on it. Google it. Find out it's his own business. Lots of Yelp reviewers, BBB rating, etc. All these links point back to his website. I go to check his website, it doesn't load up. I head over to Whois and see that the domain isn't registered. I snag it. Before I think of what to do with it, I Google the owner's name and find out that he's been convicted of murdering a child 20-ish years ago. I find a handful of links that detail his story rather explicitly. I copy/paste all those links into an email to him, a throwaway account so he can't just reply to me as I deleted it afterwards. Said something like, "Well, if you want to be a jerk for no reason, I just bought your business domain. Here's all the links I plan on posting on it. I don't have to list your business name because all of your business listings across the internet have this URL pointing to it. Keep parking like a jerk. Yes, it's legal, but you are willfully doing this just to annoy me. I legally bought your domain and can legally link these articles. Park behind me again and I'll launch it." Within an hour, his truck was moved into his driveway. He asked me for the domain. I told him, when either you move or I move, I'll hand it over. Until then, it'll remain offline. The next story is titled, A Coworker Would Kick My Lunch Seat Across the Room Every Day at Lunch, and I Got Him Back. For lunch, a group of my coworkers, our foreman and myself, would sit and eat lunch in the foreman's little hut every day. My seat was an empty-lidded 5-gallon bucket, and every day, as I was getting ready to sit, one coworker would kick it across the room before I had a chance to sit down. Everyone found it hilarious. It was funny the first couple of times, but it got old. So one day, I thought it would be hilarious to cut the bottom of the bucket off and then fill it with nuts and bolts and put the lid back on. That day at lunch, we go in, he tries to kick the bucket, of course it goes nowhere, and he angrily picks it up and tosses the bucket across the room. And of course, as he picks the bucket up, all the nuts and bolts go spilling out of the bottom. It was hilarious and everyone in the hut was laughing. I had brought in a camping chair, pulled it out, and sat down and said, "Damn man, it looks like you have a mess to clean up." The next story is titled, Give Me Your Property, You Don't Need It Right Now, and the Unexpected MVPs. I thought stores would be closed off or working much shorter hours during the holidays. Once I got to the store, I saw that I was, sadly for the people working there, mostly wrong. But that meant I would not need to buy as much as I initially thought. I brought with me 3 reusable shopping bags, but ended up needing just 1. While I can't say I have an emotional attachment to their bags, I do like them very much. I bought them because I loved the design, color, and print on them, and gave a bit more money than one would buying reusable shopping bags in the grocery store. They are nice, practical, and I like them. I finished loading my stuff onto the conveyor belt at the cash register and put the separator so that the people behind me do not waste time but start uploading their haul. Last, I put my 3 bags on top of my stuff because I had them in the shopping cart while I was picking stuff up. While I'm fishing out my wallet from my purse, I catch a flash or color in my periphery. I look up and see the woman behind me reached over and took 2 of my bags. Confused, I stutter, "Excuse me, those are not store bags, those are my own property. Please give them back to me." Entitled woman. I know these are not the store ones, I'm not an idiot. This store has red bags with their logo on them. Me. Then why are you taking my property? Entitled woman. You don't need all of them. Your groceries will fit nicely into just that one. I need these. Mind your own business and stop making a scene. Now I'm confused and getting irritated. I'm making a scene? For confronting her politely about taking my stuff? But before I can even react, the older gentleman who was a customer before me in the line has just finished paying his bill as well as the cashier around on this woman. Cashier. You will give her back her property or I will have the security escort you out. Customer before me. How dare you behave as if you are the one being inconvenienced? You take this girl's property and tell her she does not need it and should not resist you? If you need reusable bags, just buy them for yourself. Entitled woman starts huffing and puffing. Now wait just a minute, why are you all making such a scene? Cashier all but yells, now! I'm not negotiating or listening to you. Taking the property of others is stealing no matter how you try to reason it. The cashier then picks up her mic and calls security to the register and looks at entitled woman sternly. Cashier. What will it be? Entitled woman gives me back my bags while mumbling something about, it's just a few worthless bags. I thank the cashier and the old man and go on my merry way. I didn't do much but stand my ground, but the cashier and the old man were the MVPs. It did warm my heart that people saw something nasty and immediately jumped in to correct the foul behavior. Happy holidays, everyone. The next story is titled, We Can't Take Walk-Ups at Wendy's. I'm not sure if this fits here or not, but I'll put it here anyway. For context, I work at a Wendy's, and we can't take walk-ups at the window. This lady's walking up to the dining room, and I tell her it's closed because we're short-staffed, and she walks around to the back to go to the speaker. She then walks around to the window when I didn't take her order on the speaker because it only detects cars and anything with a motor, really. I tell her we can't take walk-ups because if she and her kid, did I mention she had a kid with her, were to be hit by a car in the drive-thru, we would be held liable for damages. She decides to say to her kid, sorry, looks like they don't want to serve us. We didn't want any anyway, and walks away with a full smile on her face. I'll admit what I did next was a bit rude, but I was so annoyed as I was closing the window, I go, and she looks back, still smiling. Update, I'm seeing now a few hours later that this isn't entitlement, but immense frustration about it. But there was no need for passive-aggressive words, and one comment felt pretty correct about how we put up with so much crap that we become annoyed in advance when these things happen. The last story is titled, Entitled Parent Thinks I'm Too Young to Be Disabled. Note, I tried to post this earlier today, but I posted it on my own profile instead. I'm a young female with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. From the outside, I look just like any other woman around my age. However, this has caused many encounters with entitled people when I use accessible seats, bathrooms, parking spots, etc. I was at a shopping mall yesterday with my friends. Everything was going well until I had to use the bathroom and entitled mother arrived with a 5 or 6-year-old child. I use the accessible bathrooms because of dizziness and balance problems. Alright, here we go. I enter the accessible bathroom and entitled mother gives me a dirty look. After I close the door, she starts screaming. Excuse me, this is a family bathroom. I have a child and you clearly do not. Me. I'm sorry, but this is also an accessible bathroom. I have a disability and I need to use this bathroom. Entitled mother. A disability? Where is your wheelchair? Me. Not everyone with a disability uses a wheelchair. Please stop. Entitled mother doesn't like my response. You're too young to be disabled. You're probably faking it to get benefits. I do not receive disability benefits and am fully capable of working.
Me, trying not to get angry at entitled mother. People of any age or gender can be disabled. And like I said, I need to use this bathroom or else I might faint. Entitled mother. Fainting is not a disability. Let us use the bathroom. I am a single parent. She bangs on the door. I don't say anything after that because I realize that there's no point in fighting an entitled parent who probably won't learn anything from my words. I finish up and exit the bathroom. Entitled mother says to her child, "See, that's a person who has no respect for innocent kids like you." I felt bad for the child because they looked really embarrassed and was pulling on their mom's leg. As they entered the bathroom, the child apologized for their mom's behavior. 5-year-old children can still be more mature than their parents.
The next one is an entitled people story. It all starts with the most infernal of devices at the gym. The treadmill. See, a friend of mine who is basically a professional gym rat told me, "Dude, bro, guy, you gotta up your cardio game," and insists that a half hour on a treadmill every time I hit the gym would be a good plan. Life pro tip. When someone addresses you as dude, bro, guy, seek a second opinion. Did the treadmill thing for a few weeks, and then I noticed anytime I went downhill, my knee was like, "Hey, you're an a-hole. Stop that." Which was a problem. As I have a dog who likes to go on walks and where I live is not precisely known for its flat terrain, this was an issue. Then it got worse. Now it was downhills and stairs. Deadlifts? Squats? Leg press? No problem. Slight downhill? Stairs? Oh no. Figuring knees aren't something one should ignore and hope it goes away with, I met with my doctor. She promptly referred me to physical therapy and not a knee brace like I was hoping. I met with the PT lady. She did an exam, said my quads are wonk and need work. I also discovered where my quads are. I was told to do not a lot with my legs at the gym other than bikes or swimming. All things being equal, I'll swim. I can swim, but I cannot swim well for very long. Turns out being out of breath and trying to get actual air in isn't as easy as it used to be, especially when some fat ass is splashing water all around. Until my lungs catch up with the rest of me, I've adopted what I call the fatty twirl. 4 or 5 strokes of freestyle, roll onto my back, and then kick with the legs until I've got air in me. Then roll back for more and pray I haven't gotten close enough to the edge of the pool to smack my hand into it. I assume I'm doing well because PT lady hasn't given me that I am disappoint look typically reserved for dentists when one has forgotten to floss. But that brings us to yesterday. Normally, I go in the morning, mostly in the interests of avoiding shrieking children while I'm trying to do my thing. But work was nutty, and I went later than I usually do. There were clumps of teenagers doing I don't even know what, but they mostly just snickered to each other, and I minded my business. Now, the dry part of my routine is done, and it's pool time. I wound up taking a lap lane next to a grandmother in her 50s who was apparently trying to teach her grandkid, who was 10 tops, how to swim properly. I didn't hear a whole lot, seeing as when my ears weren't underwater, there was a fat guy splashing and making a bunch of noise, but I could tell the kid was splashing and coughing a lot, and this made Grandma upset. I didn't pay attention because it wasn't my business and there were lifeguards. I just wanted to get my laps done. Was on an extended period of back float time trying to catch my breath when I was ambushed by a pool noodle. Said noodle was applied directly to my face and not gently. While not painful, a noodle to the noggin is quite startling. I believe the first words out of my mouth were, "What the hell?" It was Grandma wielding the noodle, and she was giving me a very stern look. "Watch your language and stop doing that." I asked Grandma what it was I was doing that led her to believe smacking me with a noodle was a good idea. Grandma informed me that I was swimming stupid and her grandson wanted to copy me, so I needed to stop. After I confirmed that was in fact why I was assaulted with a noodle, I suggested that she might have better luck in the kids' part of the pool. You know, the one over there, far away from me. She said she was just fine here. I was the one causing the problem. I thanked her for her opinion and promptly resumed my swim. On my return trip, this woman stepped into my lane and grabbed my ankle. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I'm swimming and something grabs my leg, instant panic response. I immediately started flailing and kicking wildly, trying to free myself. Grandma got herself a nice adrenaline kick right on her forearm. I came up gasping for air and ready to start swinging. I'm stopped by the soothing sounds of Grandma wailing about how I just broke her arm. Edit. Her arm was not, in fact, broken. She wound up with a nasty bruise, and that was it. I caught her with the top of my foot.
Pro tip: top of the foot is a bad place to land a kick with. Naturally, that's enough to get the lifeguards involved, none of whom were apparently paying attention before she started screaming. Two of them are lifting Grandma out of the pool and trying to examine her arm while she's still wailing and flailing. A third is giving me static about kicking another guest in the pool. Well, they started to until I pointed out where the kicking happened and her grandson was. Poor kid had frozen in place with an expression of abject horror. Once she connects the dots, she realizes I'm not the problem. I tell her I'm going to go get changed and then I'll identify myself to the front desk because if I'm going to get interrogated, I'd prefer to be clothed. I did my thing, and by the time I'd showered and changed, there was a manager at the desk apologizing for what had gone on. They reviewed the tapes, and that woman's membership had been terminated, and they're very sorry, please don't sue us. Best. Interrogation ever. The next story is titled, Neighbor Threatens Farmer and Calls Police for Alleged Trespassing on His Own Land, but Faces Epic Revenge from Farmer Who Won't Be Messed With. My family has owned a farm for generations, and I've been running it for years. It's hard work, but it's also incredibly fulfilling, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. The farm is situated in a rural area, and there are several neighboring homes on one side. Most of the people in these homes appreciate the peace and quiet of the countryside, and we all get along well. However, one neighbor in particular made it his mission to make my life miserable. A couple of years ago, an elderly woman who had lived in one of the neighboring houses passed away, and her son, Andrew, inherited the property. I assumed he would sell it and move on, but he moved in instead. I tried to welcome him by taking over a basket of fresh produce and some milk from our dairy cows, but he barely acknowledged me, and I felt like I was wasting my time. He asked me if I always started the tractor early in the morning, and I told him I had to keep to my schedule to keep the farm running smoothly. He wasn't happy about it, but I didn't think too much of it. Over time, I noticed that Andrew seemed to have a problem with me. He complained about the noise from the farm animals, which he said kept him up at night, and he accused me of trespassing on his land, even though I never did. I always made sure that I kept my side of the fence clean and well kept, but he seemed to have it in for me. One day, while I was doing some routine yard work, he approached me and told me that I had to get off his property. I was taken aback by his aggressive tone, and I tried to explain that I was on my land, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, he threatened to call the police and have me arrested for trespassing. I was confused and didn't know what to do. I had always tried to be a good neighbor, but this guy seemed to have a grudge against me for no reason. A few days later, I went on a short vacation, and I had someone take care of the animals and the crops while I was gone. When I came back, I noticed that the fence between our properties had been moved, and I was now supposedly trespassing on his land. When I confronted Andrew about it, he became aggressive and pulled out a machete, threatening to kill me. I was terrified, and I knew I had to do something. I called the police, and when they arrived, Andrew tried to make it seem like I was the aggressor, but the police quickly saw through his lies and realized that he was the one causing trouble. They arrested him, and he was charged with several crimes, including assault with a deadly weapon and drug possession. It turned out that he had been dealing drugs out of his house and was using me as a scapegoat to keep the authorities off his back. After Andrew was taken away, I felt relieved, but also angry. I had done nothing to deserve his hostility, and he had put me and my family in danger. I decided to take action to ensure that he wouldn't be a problem in the future. I talked to a lawyer and made sure that the fence between our properties was legally established, and I also filed a restraining order against him. A few months later, I received a notice from the county sheriff's office that Andrew had been released from jail and was living in a halfway house. I was worried that he would try to cause more trouble, but I tried not to think too much about it. I continued to run my farm as usual, and everything seemed to be going well. That is, until one day when I noticed that some of my animals were missing. At first, I thought they had just wandered off somewhere, but when I searched the property, I found signs that someone had broken into the barn and stolen them. I immediately thought of Andrew. He was the only person who would have any reason to steal my animals, and I knew he was capable of it. I called the police and they launched an investigation. They searched Andrew's new place of residence and found some of my animals on his property. They also discovered evidence that he had been planning to do something even worse. It turns out that Andrew had been plotting to burn down my barn and destroy my crops. He had been working with some other criminals, and they had even made a plan to harm me and my family. If it hadn't been for my animals going missing, I might never have known what they were up to. The police arrested Andrew and his accomplices, and they were charged with a long list of crimes. Andrew was sentenced to several years in prison, and his property was seized by the government. I was relieved that justice had been served, but I was also shaken up by how close I had come to being seriously hurt. After the incident, I decided to take some additional measures to ensure my safety and the safety of my family. I installed a security system around my property, and I made sure that all of my neighbors knew what had happened. I also made a point of keeping in touch with the police, just in case anything else happened. As time went by, I started to feel more at ease. I continued to run my farm, and it became more successful than ever. I even began to expand my business, and I started to sell some of my products at a local farmer's market. I had never felt prouder of what I was doing, and I knew that I had overcome a huge challenge. Update, it's been a few years since the incident, and things have been going well. Andrew is still in prison, and I haven't heard anything from him since he was arrested. My farm is thriving, and I've even hired some additional help to keep up with the demand for my products. I'm also more involved in the community, and I've started to give talks at local schools about the importance of agriculture and the challenges that farmers face. I've also become an advocate for rural safety, and I've worked with local law enforcement to develop programs to help farmers and other rural residents stay safe. I'm proud to say that my efforts have made a difference, and I've received several awards for my work. Looking back, I realized that the incident with Andrew was a turning point in my life. It made me stronger, and it showed me that I was capable of overcoming any challenge that came my way. I'm grateful for the support of my family, my neighbors, and the police, and I'm proud of the work that I do every day. I know that I'll never forget what happened, but I'm also confident that I'm prepared for whatever comes next. The next story is titled, Man Refuses to Let Me Enter the Elevator, Ends Up Spending More Time Than Necessary in the Elevator. So, I'm a black man living in Eastern Europe. Cue one fateful afternoon when I wanted to go down and collect something from a friend who was passing by. I press the elevator and wait for it to arrive. Elevator door opens and there's a couple inside, but as I try to enter, the man blocks the passage, telling me to wait for the elevator to return. Mind you, I'm on the 7th floor and my friend was already waiting for me to come down. Also, the elevator has a fixed time before its doors close, about 20 seconds. So you'll have to wait for the doors to close after you enter. Back to my story. I tell this man and his wife that I'm actually in a hurry and I had to go down now. And he literally stands in front of the elevator entrance shouting, "No!" His wife tells him to let me in since there was still space, but he refused. I said, "Alright," and decided to use the stairs. Cue my petty revenge. I ran down the stairs, didn't mind the cardio really, and pressed all the elevator buttons on all the lower floors. Got to my friend and collected my package, then ran back upstairs. On my way back up, I could hear the man cussing out inside the elevator and his wife's laughter. They hadn't even reached the ground floor yet. I felt so proud of myself. TLDR, man refuses to let me enter the elevator when I was in a hurry, and I ran down and pressed all the elevator buttons. Edit. This definitely blew up. I love the elevator puns, guys. Keep 'em coming. Lol. Some of y'all are much more evil than I am. Someone said I should have gone down to the next floor and keep on pressing the elevator button until he lets me in. One even said I should have gone to turn off the elevator. I don't actually know how to do that, and I don't think I would have if I knew where the switch was. Also, it would have been much more satisfying if the elevator stopped working on its own accord. COVID or racism? I don't know, and I actually don't care. I was wearing a mask, but he wasn't. The last story is titled, Crazy Karen at a Starbucks. This just happened at the Starbucks I'm still sitting at. I'm a regular customer at a Starbucks in my town, and for reference, I was just sitting at a table watching this happen. So, a woman walks up to the counter with her drink, dragon fruit iced tea with lemonade in it, and calls over the barista. Woman. Hi, sir, could you please remake this drink? Barista. Yeah, sure, what was the problem with it? Woman. It made me feel sick. There's something wrong with your lemonade. Remake it right now. Barista. Okay, no problem, man. So, he goes to remake the drink and rinses the cup, cap, and straw with water. He hands her back the cap and straw, and she goes, "Oh, it's okay, you can just use another cup and stuff. You have it, don't you?" So this guy uses another cup to make the drink. She takes it back, and then starts getting mad. Woman. Did you use the same lemonade from the pitcher? Barista. Yes, man, that's the lemonade we use for everyone. Woman. Can you just get the concentrate and put it in my drink? Barista. For sure. So he makes the drink for a third time with a third cup per request of the woman and hands it back to her. She finally seems happy and walks back to her table. You'd think that's it, but oh no, this woman just doesn't seem to ever be happy. She comes up to the counter and calls the barista over. I kid you not, these are her exact words. Woman. Can you have someone else make this for me? You must be new here and making it wrong. I am a regular, so I feel like I should be treated better than this. Barista. Actually, I've been here for a little over a year, and I've never seen you before. If you need me to, I can make this drink for you again. The woman throws the cup at the barista, cussed him out, and leaves the store in a rage. At this point, I feel so bad for the barista that I go over and help him clean up the mess she made. So that was the crazy Starbucks experience I just had.
The next one is an entitled people story.
I'm 29 and had been dealing with this for some time, but recently this became ridiculous. My grandmother is the most special person I ever knew, and with special I mean one of the most frustrating, entitled, narcissistic, condescending idiots on earth. She believes that she is the matriarch of the family, the highest authority that we must all obey, and for that she has done a lot of things to all the family over the years, and recently I became her main objective. A couple months ago, she organized a family meeting at her house. Believing it was just a family meal, we all went, and when everyone was there, she revealed her true intentions. It was a trap. Apparently, someone told my grandmother that I was dating a girl, my girlfriend, and basically she exposed me to all the family. In that moment, I haven't even told my parents about it yet. The following 30 minutes were a non-stop humiliation in front of all of my family, saying how much of a failure I was, a shame to the family, a sinner, and how embarrassed she was that all her church's friends knew I was a shameless pervert. When I couldn't take her crap anymore, I got up from my chair just to be slapped in the face by her for disrespecting her. After seeing that, the rest of the family finally intervened, getting her apart before she tried to pull my hair. The following weeks, she was nothing more than a constant headache. Endless calls and text messages telling me such beautiful things as that I will burn for my sins, that I was a disgrace, that I should stop fooling around and correct my life. She even lectured my parents demanding that they correct me, to make me quit my job and find a husband because that was the right thing to do and what I should be doing. Also, she took every chance she got to say how evil and selfish I was for ruining her good image. Last Saturday, she outdid herself. While I was in my apartment, there was a knock on the door, and when I opened it, I saw that it was her. By that point, I was no longer trying to hide my displeasure from her, and I just said, "Ah, it's you. What do you want?" Without being invited to come in, she went into my house, began to look around the place with an obvious gesture of disgust and disapproval on her face, and then turned to see me with that look of superiority as if she were doing me a favor just for being there. She told me that she had already given me more than enough time to reconsider and correct my life, so she was there so that I could apologize to her. I just laughed sarcastically and told her that she was crazy and that she could go now. She then started lecturing me with the same speech again, but I didn't take it. I interrupted her and let out all the things I've wanted to tell her for a long time. That she was a stupid old witch, that she was not an authority figure to anyone, that her presence alone ruins our day, that nobody can stand her, that she is such a horrible and suffocating grandmother and mother that she should not find it strange that none of her children love her or visit her unless she forces them to. I knew I had hurt her by the way she tensed her face and how she tried to hide the tears in her eyes. It was then that she said, "Enough. I can see that you don't understand the good way, so I will have to correct you in the old way. Give me the keys to this place. You will return to your parents and you will be grounded until you learn to obey and do what I ordered." I still had the keys in my hand from when I opened the door, to which she extended hers as if waiting for me to give them to her. I laughed. I laughed out loud. This was too ridiculous that I couldn't take it seriously. And apparently that made her so mad that she lunged at me trying to grab my keys. We struggled, there were screams, things falling out of place. The damn witch got to the point of digging her nails into my arms and biting my hands. The scandal was such that a couple of neighbors went out to see what was going on, and when my grandmother saw them, she started shouting that I was a thief and was trying to rob her house. Obviously, they didn't believe her. They were my neighbors. They knew me. They separated her from me, and when she saw that they did not believe her and that I wouldn't obey her, she threatened me with, "Your parents will know about this," and left. Since then, she had been telling everyone how I insulted her and violently attacked her. We all know her. We all know she's a liar. She just makes everyone's lives harder. The next story is titled, "Revenge Backfires: How Retaliating Against HOA Karen for a Duck Feeding Fine Resulted in Her Removal." I never thought that living in a community could be a nightmare until I met Karen. Karen was the newest member of the Homeowners Association board, and she had a problem with everything. She was a woman in her late 50s with a permanent scowl etched on her face. She had moved into the neighborhood after retiring from her corporate job and had taken it upon herself to police every aspect of the community. From the color of the houses to the height of the lawns, Karen had an opinion on everything. Her attitude was insufferable, and she never wanted to be a part of any community activity. She would always find something to argue about, and people would avoid her like the plague. I thought I was the only one who had a problem with her until the ducks came into the picture. The neighborhood had a small pond that the ducks would frequently visit. The maintenance crew had forgotten to put the fake alligator heads to keep the ducks away, and I thought it would be nice to feed them some bread. It was something that many of us did, and nobody ever had a problem with it until Karen came out of nowhere, shouting and screaming at me and my granddaughter for feeding the ducks. She then took it upon herself to fine me $500 for feeding unapproved wildlife. I thought that was the end of it, but Karen's actions had gone too far. I was enraged and wanted to teach her a lesson. I remembered a prank that my brother had once played on another brother. I decided to use that same tactic on Karen. My granddaughter and I bought some birdseed and old bread from the bakery and fed the ducks, creating a trail of food from the pond to Karen's yard. We waited in my garage and watched as the ducks marched towards Karen's yard, and it was as if they had never eaten before. They ate and made a mess of everything, and Karen could not do anything about it. It was a sweet revenge that Karen never expected, and the next day, she was the talk of the neighborhood. Her fellow board members had received complaints from the surrounding neighbors, and they had no choice but to let her go from the board. 6 months later, Karen sold her house and left the neighborhood for good. The ducks were happy, and we could finally go back to our peaceful lives. But Karen's story did not end there. After she left our community, she moved to a nearby town, and unfortunately for the new residents there, she started causing the same problems. She would find something to complain about and would take it upon herself to enforce the rules with an iron fist. The community members were not happy with her attitude, and they decided to band together to put a stop to it. They knew about her past in our neighborhood and her tendency to cause trouble. They decided to make a plan to expose her, and they asked for my help. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to help them. Together, we created a fake homeowners association and invited Karen to be a part of it. We made her believe that we were looking for someone to take charge of the community's affairs, and she was the perfect person for the job. We gave her a list of rules and asked her to enforce them. Little did she know that the rules we gave her were ridiculous and impossible to enforce. We had included rules like no breathing after 10 p.m. and no pets allowed in the community. Karen fell for the trap and went on a power trip trying to enforce the rules that we had given her. We recorded everything she said and did, and presented the evidence to the real homeowners association. They were shocked at her behavior and decided to kick her out of the community. Karen was once again forced to move to another state, but this time she was not able to find a new community to cause trouble in. Word of her past behavior had spread, and no community was willing to have her as a member of their homeowners association. Karen had no other choice but to move into an apartment complex where she could no longer enforce her rules on anyone. However, Karen being Karen, she found a new hobby to occupy her time. She started spying on her neighbors and reporting every little infraction to the apartment management. The other residents found her behavior unsettling and complained to the management, but they were unable to do anything about it. Karen had not technically broken any rules, and the management could not force her to stop. One day, one of Karen's neighbors had enough of her constant meddling and decided to teach her a lesson. The neighbor knew that Karen had a habit of going on her daily walks at exactly the same time every day, and he decided to use that to his advantage. He set up a trap for Karen by leaving a pile of birdseed in her path. As expected, Karen saw the birdseed and started complaining about it. But as she was walking away, a group of ducks that had been hiding in the bushes suddenly appeared and started chasing her. Karen ran as fast as she could, but the ducks were faster. They chased her all the way back to her apartment where they made a mess of everything. Karen was covered in birdseed and duck droppings, and she was completely humiliated. The neighbor who had set up the trap had recorded the entire incident, and he posted the video online. It quickly went viral, and people all over the country were sharing it and laughing at Karen's misfortune. Karen was once again the talk of the town, but this time it was not because of her bad behavior. She had become a meme, and people were using her name to describe anyone who was difficult to deal with. Karen eventually moved to another state where nobody knew about her past behavior, but she had learned her lesson and decided to keep to herself. She realized that her behavior had caused her nothing but trouble and had made her a laughingstock. As for me, I was glad that I had been able to teach her a lesson. I had no hard feelings towards her, and I was happy to see that she had learned from her mistakes. The neighborhood was once again peaceful, and the ducks were happily quacking away at the pond. I knew that I could now feed them without any trouble, and I did so every chance I got. The next story is titled, Letting My Ex-Husband Drown in Attorney Fees. After 5 years of marriage and endless false promises, I finally get my personal revenge. My ex-husband, 32, and I, 33, got married in 2017 after 1 year of long-distance relationship between the US and Germany. We sealed the deal, got married in the US, and he wanted me to live with him in the good old US of A because he didn't want to learn another language. To make things easier, he moved in with me in Germany for a job I helped him to get, so we would have time to initialize my plans of emigration and immigration. Now, my ex didn't even get started to gather all required documents for himself to be my sponsor. Said and done, I had all documents well sorted out, canceled all my contracts, sold my belongings, sent large parts of my things to the US, and said goodbye to my lovely home, friends, and family. Little did I know, my ex-husband did not do a single bit of research or even did his part for my immigration process, and I wasn't able to set foot on the plane that would bring me to my new home. Long story short, he left to the US without me, and I was homeless, with a suitcase and 2 cats. He continued to lead me on with promises to come and get me. Meanwhile, he started a polyamorous affair. Later, he got involved with a 21-year-old young lady. I lived with my parents for a few months to get back on my feet, find a new apartment, and a new source of income. Now, I never went to German officials to get our marriage recognized in Germany, mostly because I didn't think it was necessary because we planned to live together in the US. But my laziness was proven to be useful later. Since he was with his new girlfriend, 21, I broke up the relationship. In the US, we still count as married, and focused on myself, regaining my independence and rebuilding my life in my home country. I fell in love with an acquaintance, 31, I've known for 13 years, and we soon found that we have very much the same goals in life and the very same ideals and wishes for a monogamous life. Meanwhile, I've been in contact with my ex to finally get him to start the divorce in the US. Since the marriage was closed in the US, only a US citizen is able to petition for the divorce at the district court. I didn't want my name to be further affiliated with him, and I also didn't see the reason why he should further profit from tax benefits. I made clear I didn't want this anymore and wanted to move on. Finally, he got a process started and forgot one single thing. I am not an American citizen. So everything that applies in the US when it comes to paperwork doesn't apply to me in Germany. Which means, serving me via email? Nope. Wanting me to sign something electronically? Nope, not possible. All they would have to do is send me the notarized, signed, and translated paperwork via physical mail. But they don't. So I get email after email with pleas to get me to sign the US divorce papers electronically. With every mail his lawyer sends me, his pay ramps up. Don't get me wrong, I certainly told the lawyer what he has to do in order to get me to sign a legally significant piece of paper, but I guess he doesn't know international laws. So, at this point, my ex still sits on all my belongings I asked him to give back, and since he doesn't do that, I'll keep collecting spam mails from his lawyer. That's my personal revenge for leading me on, using my hopeless romantic heart, and leaving me alone when things went hard. I don't count as married in Germany, and am currently expecting a little baby boy with my partner, and we're building a life together without false promises. The last story is titled, Still Heated with This Karen. So, this happened today. Backstory, I work as a computer tech for my school district. We've been giving out laptops since March 19th to parents who don't have a computer at home for their kids. Today, a Karen had an appointment for 12:15 p.m. We close up at 1 p.m. We saw her strolling in at 12:53 p.m. when we already started closing up. Karen. Hello, I'm here to pick up a laptop. Me. Sure, I already have it prepared. Takes like 10 minutes to set up. I handed the laptop to her. Karen. This laptop is junk. I don't want this. I want this one. She points at a teacher laptop. Me. You can't have this laptop. It's for teachers. Karen. Well, I won't accept this piece of crap. I need a touchscreen. Are you telling me I can't have a better laptop? Me. That's exactly what I'm telling you. All remaining laptops we have are the same for students. Karen. Every child deserves the best, and I don't want this crumb of a laptop. Who do I call to get a touchscreen laptop? Best Buy is closed. Coworker gives her a number she can call, which is our makeshift call center for parents calling in with issues. I was about to go off on this idiot. If your child deserves the best, then buy a laptop. Best Buy is not closed, liar. Target, Walmart, and Amazon are open. You're here for a free laptop and complaining? Secondly, you waited literally 8 weeks to get your child a laptop when we've been giving them out since March 19th, and the school year ends in 2 weeks. What a waste of a parent. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.